Welcome to the Fergus Falls Business Spotlight Podcast, the show that takes a deep dive into local businesses and the individuals that run our community. To guide you along the way, here's your host, Jacob Bittner.
Ooh, we've got Team Chamberlain Real Estate in the studio today. I've been working for Team Chamberlain. Well, to get them on the show, not working for you guys, but working on getting you guys on the show for a long time. So welcome in this morning, Heidi, Andy, Chamberlain. How are you guys doing?
Thank you, Jacob.
Pretty good.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to have you guys. I'm excited to talk real estate. We did just have a real estate episode not too long ago. We had Wayne and Sarah from Century 21. Mm-hmm. So anyone who is looking for real estate information, definitely refer to that episode as well. We're not going to get into the depth of the history of the real estate industry quite like we did last time, because we just did that like a few episodes ago. So we don't need to do that again. By all means, listen to the Century 21 episode.
Yeah, it was a good one.
It was. You guys caught that?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And let's talk a little bit before we get going here about these sponsors we've got a great list of sponsors. We're kicking off July with a few new sponsors. Along with Outstate, Victor Lundeen's, Lakes Area Grow Co., Stumbino's, Elks Point Bar and Grill. All these businesses are coming along and supporting the show. So I'm pretty excited. We're kicking off a new segment on the show, the beer of the week. And to say that I'm excited about this segment is an understatement, because it's here. It is like, where it's 4 p.m. here at the radio station. I've just worked a long day. I'm ready for a little bit of beer. So we're going to get into this beer of the week segment every week. I'm excited for it.
Nice.
I believe the way this is going to work is I'm going to say the name or the number of the episode and the beer that we are reviewing. And if you're paying attention, you can go into Outstate and tell them. I heard on episode 95, I think this is 94. I should know that for sure. We'll call this episode 94. I heard that there was a Shore Lunch Shandy on episode 94. That'll get you $1 off a beer at Outstate.
Nice.
So listen to the show, listen for the beer of the week segment, and let those guys know that you're hearing about them on here, because that's what this is all about, is getting the word out. So we've got the Shore Lunch Shandy here today. Never had it before, huh, guys?
I have.
We've all had the Shore
Come
Lunch.
on.
We've all had it. I feel a little, actually, I'm gonna pause this for a second, because I had an official description that I got from the brewer here, but I failed to bring it with me. So I'm gonna grab that really quick, and then we're gonna get into these beers here.
We're thinking about like switching when you paused.
or drinking the beer so you come back and they're empty. Like, whoopsie.
Okay, we're back here. Sorry about that. I had to make sure that I've got the materials I need here, because Sean over at Outstate did a very good job of providing me with the information I needed on this beer. So this Shore Lunch Shandy here, it is a shandy. It's 4.2% alcohol with a nice low 17 IBU. So we're looking at bitterness, international bitterness units, or bitterness unit, I believe, is what that IBU stands for. Not a bitter beer at all. Very, very easy, very, very sweet. The description here: the aroma of fresh squeezed lemonade fills the senses when you first smell this beer. A refreshing sweetness helps balance the right bitterness from the lemons and makes this American wheat ale a true summertime favorite. So we've got the 4th of July coming up here. This episode, I think, is coming out on the 1st of July. So This is a 4th of July beer right here. Yeah. Absolutely. Each batch is made with over 1,000 fresh squeezed lemons. So you're not getting a lemon puree. You're getting a true fresh lemon shandy here. So let's crack these open, guys, and just see what we got here. I'm excited.
So I was at Outstate this year, the day they unveiled the shandy for the first time this year. And there were people from out of town saying that they were coming just for the shandy. So it is kind of famous.
It is very famous. I don't drink enough of the shore lunch, but this is going to be good for me to get into drinking some of these beers that I just don't drink enough of them when I'm in the tap room. I'm stuck in my zone, you know. But while we enjoy this, I'm interested to, you know, by all means, comment on how refreshing it is. But we're going to get moving here with your guys' background interviews. So
there's one thing I want to say about Outstate is when it says that it is that fruit, that means that it's like smashed up in there.
oh yes,
Yeah. It's not a flavoring. It is that fruit in there.
yes. In this case, it absolutely is. I know that. I don't know. I think they try to use fresh fruits whenever possible. I know that there's some things that they. Well, we'll get into some different types of beers and different flavors that they use to produce that.
Their seltzers for sure are like when it says watermelon, it's muddled watermelon.
Interesting.
In the seltzer.
I should know more about that than I do. So, but let's get into your guys' background here. I think I want to start with Heidi. Tell me everything about your life before you met Andy.
Well, so I've been in business for myself for 25 years now. I was a daycare provider for 17 years. I had a daughter when I was 19, fresh out of my first year of college, and decided to do daycare and raised her on my own until she was about a junior in high school. And then I met Andy.
Where'd you say you were born?
In Mankato, Minnesota.
Grew up in Mankato, graduated from high school there?
My dad was a school teacher. So we moved here to Underwood when I was about 7.
Okay.
Moved to Fergus when I was about 8, and then he got a job at Otter Tail Power. So we stayed here.
Gotcha.
Graduated from here in 1992.
92.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have one child?
Yep, Daria. She's 30.
Okay. And so you were married prior?
Nope. It was just somebody I met in Mankato at Mankato State.
there we go. Nice.
Didn't come home with a degree, but I came home with something else.
Hey, there we go. Both of them last your whole life, you know.
Yeah, and you know, after she graduated high school and she went off to college at St. Cloud State, that's when I started looking at the house. My house had never been my own. It was always a state-run daycare facility. And it's like, maybe it's time to stop with the daycare and get all the toys away. You know, the backyard was still a playground. And, I was with Andy at the time. And, yeah, so I quit the daycare. Thought a regular time card job was something I wanted, where you just punch out and come home, because that's not daycare. Daycare's almost 24/7. Did that for about 6 months and decided maybe real estate's the way to go, because you're still helping people. Like in daycare, I'm helping people get to work, taking care of the most precious things in their lives. And with real estate, you're changing lives too.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And then, we both decided to get into it. And I just, even though there's been so many struggles, we started at maybe one of the worst times, with COVID and everything in the middle of it, but I just love it, no matter how rough.
So let's go back to growing up. So you got started with the daycare after college. Was that like a whole career kind of for you?
Yeah.
Daycare. You had that for how many years did you run that?
17.
17 years. Did you go to college for childcare or education?
I went to Alec Tech for computer programming. I have a degree in computer programming.
You do?
But I did
from
that
the 90s.
Well, yeah.
So there's a lot of good that
oh
degree
my God,
does you
it was
today.
outdated by the time I graduated.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did that while I did daycare, because I lived in a duplex house with my mom, and she lived upstairs and I lived downstairs.
Okay.
So she would watch kids during the day and my own, and then any kids that stayed after, this was kind of against the rules. But the families loved it, that anybody that stayed after 5 evening daycare, then they just came down to my apartment.
Huh.
And I would watch, so if they worked 11 to 7, drop them off at my mom's, I pick them up when I get home, and I watch them till 7.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it worked out great, but it wasn't really, kosher with the state at the time.
Hey, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. So, so that was your. Did you have any other like highlights of your career besides that that are worth mentioning, or you're just daycare and real estate?
Yeah, with daycare, I was able to buy my own house when my daughter was 11, as a single parent. Michelle Pearson was my realtor, and she was amazing because I did not know anything. And that was part of being in real estate too, is I just really strove to be the kind of agent that Michelle is, because I didn't know anything. I didn't know what earnest money was, or, and she just guided me through and knew exactly what to do to successfully get me in a home.
Awesome.
Without it hurting financially.
So single mom buying a home.
Yeah, in 2005. So right before that big crash, where interest rates went up and everybody couldn't afford their homes. But in my case, having my own home versus a basement apartment to do daycare, it just made my business that much better, because people were now coming to a house, a bigger house. Yeah. So my business grew and got more successful.
I like it. All right. Well, we'll get back to it and how you guys got started with real estate. But Andy, your turn. Where were you born?
I was born here. I've been here most of my life. There was a little bit where I lived in the Phoenix Valley, but yeah, grew up here. Graduated from here 98. Went to Morris. Got a bunch of jazz credits. That's about it.
Jazz.
Yes.
So you've been a musician since forever.
Yeah. I want to say 4 is when I started violin.
Wow.
Yeah. And then from there went to piano to drums, then drums to bass. And I've stuck with that.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Bass. Yeah. Bass is that, it's a sleeper instrument, like it doesn't look like it's that much fun. It doesn't look like there's a lot happening with it. But then like you look at the bass player and then you think it must be fun, because bass players are fun people. Yeah. So it's
one thing that I always like to say is anybody can play a bass, but not everybody can play the bass.
So you have been involved in some bands throughout the years?
Yeah.
You want to touch on those at all throughout high school or college?
Sure. The first band I was in was called Some Assembly Required. And that was with some classmates of mine. And then a few kind of offshoots of that. And my favorite band that I was in was called I Shot Ronald Reagan. And that was a punk band. Techno band called the Dirty Fantastics.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, techno.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So you're older than Andy by just a few years.
5 and a half.
5 years? Okay.
Yeah.
So I know I love your guys' love story. I like getting the love stories on the show. And that's why it's one of the reasons why I was excited to have you guys, really excited to have you guys on here, because you have such a unique, cool love story. Before we get to it, though, I feel like we're not done with your story yet. So you went to college.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever leave? Did you get away from Fergus for a while?
Yeah. So the Aaron Berge, the guitarist from I Shot Ronald Reagan, and I, we tried our hand in Phoenix to try to, because it was like a bigger music scene down there. And that didn't go very well. Came back. Yeah.
Just, okay.
Yeah, like 6 months.
6 months down there?
And just kind of ran out of money and came back.
Right. So you are a pharmacist or a pharmacy assistant. I don't know.
Pharmacy tech.
Pharmacy tech.
Yes.
At Walmart here in town. I don't know if I should have said that. They might. Don't come after us, people. We are not representing your company right now. But
I won't say anything against them.
I would assume not. I hear it's a great place to work. I know they employ a lot of people in this community. They are one of the largest employers in this community. And it's good jobs. So
yeah.
How did you get into that field? Was that obviously you have to go to college for that, right?
No. So I worked for my parents until their store closed, and then I became a shift lead at Walgreens.
What kind of they had a store, a pharmacy?
No, they had a convenience store.
A convenience store.
Yeah,
Okay.
BJ's.
Oh, let's talk about BJ's East. Let's talk about it. I didn't realize that was going to happen today. So that's an old school iconic business.
Yep.
Let's talk about the life of BJ's.
There were 4, right? 4 stores originally, or 4
eventually.
eventually.
It grew into 4 different things, and then it kind of shrunk back down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your parents started that from the ground up?
From scratch, yeah.
They started it from scratch. And where were those locations, and how did the life of that business grow and dissipate?
So it was already, the business was pretty much around before I was. So I don't know how it grew. But
Gotcha.
there was BJ's East, which was near the YMCA. BJ's West, which is where like Papa Murphy's is now.
Wow.
BJ's Central, which is across from where Pomida was.
Let's go.
Yeah.
And then there was a bulk fuel plant kind of by where...
Behind the VFW.
Yeah, and that kind of like little industrial
On
park
Junius.
there.
You know where that used to be. Everything's where, where that used to be.
Yeah.
That's where that was.
I wonder if you could have a store called BJ's Central nowadays or not.
Yeah, it was.
See how I emphasize that.
Creative.
BJ's Central. I love it. All right. So, and then they kind of slowly dissipated back down. Then it ended with just BJ's East was the last standing.
Yep, that was the last one.
I think that's pretty much all I remember from like my high school years. We used to stop there and get ice cream all the time. They had they had the best ice cream.
So I will say this: the secret for the ice cream is it's soft serve, which is like it's frozen and like air is put into it. That's what a soft serve ice cream is. The hole that let in the air was smaller than it should have been, so there's more cream to the ice cream. That's why it was so good.
Gotcha. You got to get that cream to air ratio. That's the terminology we're looking for. The right cream to air ratio. Okay. All right. So you grew up then working at BJ's, working for your parents. That was like kind of your formidable, even as a young adult.
Yeah. One of the first things that I remember doing for the store was there's that fence around it. I helped paint that fence. I would do yard work and all the stuff that I legally could do.
So you worked with them up until the time the store closed?
Yeah.
And then you decided, I got to do something else. I need a career rather than just hop into another job. Did you work some odd end jobs, filler jobs?
Yeah, I did do one. I was a delivery guy for Viking Coke for a little while, but that's very labor intensive, and I could eventually like constantly just like feel my knees and my elbows.
Oh,
So
those production, those labor jobs,
yeah,
they're work. They're hard work. And so how'd you go about becoming a pharmacy tech?
So I started at Walgreens as a shift lead, and shift leads were required to help out in the pharmacy when they needed to. And eventually I started liking that better and just kind of went into that.
Okay. And you don't need a degree. You need to get certified for that then?
So the first thing you do is basically you buy a license from the state, and then from there you get certified nationally, which takes schooling but typically if you start a job with it, they pay for the whole thing.
And was that your case?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. So how long did you say that certification took you?
Not very long. They give you up to a year before it's like, okay, we gave you time. You got to go now.
Gotcha.
So you got to, once you're licensed with the state, you have a year to get your certification before you're kicked to the curb.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's pretty much catches us up with your career.
Yeah.
Where does Heidi come into that timeline?
So it was towards the end of BJ's. Dirty Fantastics was the band I was in at the time, and there's another band called What was your dad's
Dead,
band name?
oh, Crown Vicks and Dead People Laughing.
Yeah, so Heidi's dad was in a band called Crown Vicks.
Ah.
They were all playing a show together. That's how we like met.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like my friends and her friends had been trying to get us together for a little while, and it just hadn't happened. And then one of the members of her dad's band said, "Hey, do you want to do this show?" It was for Boots on the Ground.
Yep.
Yeah,
Operation Happy Note.
Operation Happy Note. Yeah. Said, "Hey, do you want to do this show?" And we're like, kind of, I don't. And he goes, "Well, you're already on the poster." So we said yes, and then that's the show where she and I met.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
started hanging
it
out.
basically just, boom, started hanging out together.
Love at first sight.
Yeah, I mean, I had dated other people, and I'd go into BJ's and I'd see Andy with the chops, and we'd be getting like stuff to go fishing or hunting, and I'm like, ugh, I don't care for that. And I'm just like, that dude working at BJ's, he's who I should be dating because he looks cool.
Yeah. Dude, so those chops have been a fixture of your appearance for a long time.
They have, pretty much ever since I lost other options.
Okay.
I went with the
There you
the
go.
chops.
You
yeah.
got to work with what you
Yeah.
got. You got to
Yeah.
work with what you got. So, you guys met in like a garage band party.
It was at the VFW.
Oh, it was a at the
Yeah.
VFW.
Yeah.
Okay. Classic place to meet.
We have
you know?
video. I think we have like a DVD of the show. I think
Yeah.
I was filming a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
VFW is a great place. You know, you can go there to fall in love. You can go there once you've fallen out of love. You know, they just do not discriminate. They're there for everybody. So, talk about then that kind of process of getting to know each other. I love the wedding story. So some fill in between. I don't know how long you guys dated before you got married. It sounded like you kind of knew right away.
Yeah.
Well, it was a little while. It was like
Well,
5
it was
years.
more.
Oh wow.
We were together, and it's just at our age. What's the point of getting married unless there's like a reason? Like how it came to be that we got married. It wasn't our choice. It was Bono's. Bono decided.
Bono.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
So-
would have stayed engaged probably forever.
Okay, so you were fine with the common law thing, and then
Yeah.
you went to a U2 concert.
I mean, I know it was my dad's dream kind of because I'm his only daughter. He wasn't like sentimental, but I know he would have loved to walk me down the aisle. But what we did was even more special to him because he's such a music guy.
Was he alive?
Oh,
At that
yes.
time,
Oh,
he didn't come to the concert
Oh,
with
yes.
you guys, did he?
There's pictures. Yeah.
Oh, he was at the concert with
Oh,
you guys?
yes.
So everyone was there. You had your family and
Oh,
everyone there?
yes. Yeah.
Wow. So you guys got married at a U2 concert.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
So how it started was, we were in Chicago seeing U2 at Lambeau Field, and it was the Joshua Tree, like 20 years later tour. They were just redoing that whole album, and I just looked up at the sky during the concert and said, "Wouldn't this be like the most beautiful wedding night? Could you imagine like celebrating your wedding night with all these thousands of people that all love the same thing you do, and their music's so uplifting?" And I always have felt like it's my church when I'm at a U2 concert.
There's a real togetherness.
I've seen them like a dozen times. And it was after that whole thing we came back to Fergus, and they announced a Minneapolis date at US Bank Stadium. And Andy said, "So are we getting married September 8th? And I said, "I guess we are." And we just slowly figured it out.
huh.
One of my oldest friends that is here in town, Holly Schmidt. She works at Pioneer Home now. She's worked at the VFW. Her little brother, Jim, introduced me, we call him Slab, introduced me to so much cool music when I was younger. Introduced me to Jane's Addiction, and I named my daughter Daria Jane after the band. Well, we find out he lives in Minneapolis, and he's ordained, so he could marry us. So we got a hold of Father Slab, and he gave us marriage counseling and things to do it right. And he officiated the ceremony outside of the stadium while we waited in line.
Okay.
To
So
get in.
you got married officially in line
Yeah.
at the concert. Wow.
Yeah. So we had witnesses that were also in line with us, and my mom and my daughter were there, and my dad. My dad would never have missed a concert. I mean, physically he couldn't go anymore until he passed away. He would go by himself, drive all the way to see Bob Dylan and come back the same day. But yeah, there's no way he would have missed it. But yeah, and we got Oreo cookies, the birthday cake cookies. We changed it to say wedding cake, and we handed out wedding cake Oreos to the other people waiting in line.
Wow. So and then you got a shout out during the concert, which is the coolest part of it all. So you guys have this recording of Bono congratulating you guys.
Yeah, and that was a local. You can tell them about this, how Justin Retzloff told you to.
Yeah. So I had been putting it on, it was back when it was Twitter. I'd been putting it out on Twitter that we were going to be getting married.
What
at
year
U2.
did you guys get married?
2017.
Yeah,
Okay.
17.
Okay.
I'd been putting it out on there, like tagging as many U2 Twitters as I could think of. And so it was the day of the show. And finally, Justin Retzloff, another local musician, finally got a hold of me. And he's also a big U2 fan. Finally got a hold of me and said, U2.com found out about your wedding, and whatever the local TV station was, like not like their KVLY. I don't know what it is down there.
Okay.
KVRR.
Wanted to interview us, so they interviewed us while we were in line, and Heidi, talked about, they said, why do you want to get married at a concert? And Heidi had said that it's always felt like church. That it's everything that she had said just a little bit ago about how the togetherness, and there is a real feeling of like, with all of us together, we can accomplish so much good in the world. When you're at one of their shows, it is very powerful. I wasn't a big fan of U2 until I saw them live.
Huh.
I thought they were fine, and then I saw them live, and they're incredible. So then the show was kind of going. And then,
So you knew that they knew about this.
yes,
You knew, so like you guys, but had you had contact with them outside of finding out that they knew about this was happening or not?
Justin was saying U2.com's trying to get a hold of you. He was
Okay.
texting us, and we're so
How
busy.
did he know?
He was just putting it out on Twitter too, and somehow it got out, and they were instant messaging us. And that's when the news came, and they interviewed us right after we got married while we were standing in line.
Okay.
And then, nobody was going to let us up to the front. You still got to get there at like 6 a.m. and wait in line all day because it was GA tickets.
Right.
So then the news, interviewed us, and then my daughter and my mom did not want to go to the show. My dad and Andy and I had tickets, but they were just staying in the cities. I think, Daria's already seen U2 many times.
Well, she was there in Chicago when we saw it. So she was like, I already saw that concert.
Then the excitement got so great. They wanted tickets. So then I'm like contacting U2.com, like, hey, can I get tickets for No. But they got some from somebody selling outside. So they were able to come in. So it was my mom and my dad and my daughter and me and Andy. It was our family.
We should have got the recording to play the recording. But I would have queued it into my board. It would have been better quality. But anyways, it's really awesome. Cool love story.
We
I
were
think
told
it's super
not
cool.
to share it anyway by U2 because it's the property of U2.
Copyright. Yeah. That
they
makes
said
sense.
you can show people, but don't like broadcast.
Don't share it on this.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But I can tell you from listening to it 1,000 times, it was during Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, when they go to like the bridge or whatever, the instrumental part.
Yeah, where it's the Edge's solo.
Bono says, take us to church of the Chamberlains. And I turned and I looked at my dad and I was like, did he just say Church of the Chamberlains? And we're all just kind of dumbfounded.
Mm-hmm.
And we just keep going. We were right up front. We were behind kids who had these signs that said our first U2 concert. Otherwise, we were right up front. And we had signs that said, we said I do at U2. But then at the end of the song, when it's all done, he says, I was congratulating the Chamberlains because Heidi and Andy got married today in the GAQ. And interestingly, which I thought was pretty cool, is Andrew took Heidi's name.
Yeah.
Chamberlain.
Because you had such a generic, what was it?
Johnson.
Like,
Yeah.
who needs to be a Johnson when you can be a Chamberlain? So
Exactly.
anyways, I love that story. We got to move on though. We got to
yeah.
move on. We're at a
Yes.
half hour into this interview. We haven't even
jeepers.
talked about real estate yet. So you said we were going to have a tough time talking. We are going to have a tough time containing you, I think. So let's move on to Team Chamberlain. So this was something that started around COVID or
Before.
prior to 28. So you guys were married in 2017.
Yep.
Started this, got into real estate right away.
I think we were in real estate before we got married because it'll be 8 years this July.
Okay.
We've been licensed for real estate.
And that process of you guys both got licensed together as agents together, just went through the class together.
And then we just didn't know. Like I was working full time at Zip Trip. He was working full time at Walgreens. You know, the dream was to be able to quit both our full time jobs and just do real estate. But that's not practical with benefits and things like that. That someone
Right.
has to have a job.
Gotcha. Therefore, pharmacy, tech, and then you, this kind of real estate, kind of your full-time gig. I know that you hop around and work some
Yeah.
different jobs
We
when you have
all
to.
have side
Everybody's got
hustles.
side hustles for sure. So talk about the Team Chamberlain Trilogy Real Estate, how that is all structured together.
Like how we
Yeah.
got into Trilogy.
Yeah. What is Trilogy?
Well, the Trilogy stands for Community Collaboration and Contribution. And so we're very, it's a small boutique brokerage founded by Teresa Halverson, who used to be with Keller Williams, where we were. Well, Keller Williams Realty Professionals, it's based out of Baxter, Minnesota. They have last I knew, 80 agents. We just happen to have the broker in our town. Tom Verhelst was the broker. I didn't realize how big Keller Williams, you think Ryan Hansen, you think Mary Pettit. We joined under Laura Johnson because I've always loved Laura and worked with Laura. And Michelle Pearson was at Keller Williams at the time. Well, Tom passed away. And then our broker for a tiny bit was Ryan while they tried to find a new one. Well, the new one's now in Baxter. And that's when I really realized how big, even though I was the compliance officer for the whole brokerage, how big and complicated Keller Williams is. And I was kind of lost myself losing Tom, having a broker right in town, and he was just so good. Thinking Century 21, we'd already been to Remax, we'd already worked for Remax. What were we going to do? And then a bunch of other agents at Keller Williams were kind of thinking the same thing and said, hey, we're going to meet this Teresa Halverson. She does her own brokerage out of Fargo. So now we have a branch in Fergus Falls.
And so that was established as Trilogy Real Estate out of Fargo.
Yep, just Teresa had started it after leaving Keller Williams herself, and then came to us and said, it's the same culture. The culture of Keller Williams is amazing. The coaching, I was ready to quit at one time, and I had 2 agents on the phone plus my broker's wife convincing me not to quit. Even if you don't get a deal in a year, if you love it, don't quit, keep moving forward. And so, yeah, it's all that same positivity, and we really hold each other up and celebrate each other's wins. So yeah, Trilogy, and it's more small. So I just feel it's more manageable, more personal.
And then the Team Chamberlain, is that just like your kind of the way you guys title yourselves under that, or is that a separate entity? I'm still trying to figure out how all that works.
I mean, we were part of the chamber. We were like, but you have to be like Wayne Schuett had said in yours. You have to be under a brokerage.
Yep.
So everywhere we go, we're still Team Chamberlain. If one of us were to quit, then we'd have to do something because we can't both be on the business cards. We're both on the signs.
Okay.
But yeah, so we come as a package deal, and
So I'm not going to get too deep into the history, but listening through that Century 21 history of real estate, is there anything that stood out to you guys particularly in that episode that you think is worth mentioning or talking about?
sometimes just with what was happening with the racial stuff in the cities, how that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
That there was blockbusting and steering and telling your clients don't move to that neighborhood.
Yeah, and redlining and
Yeah, that wasn't that long ago. That it was okay.
We're less than 2 30-year mortgages away.
Yeah.
you know? So it's very, very, very interesting. That surprised me too when I started looking at that, like the Fair Credit Act or whatever, Opportunity to Credit Act, whatever that was called. Very, very surprising that we're just not as disconnected as to that period of time as we like to think we are. Now, I think that, you know, what Sarah mentioned in that too, like the market has had a certain amount of time to recover as well. And I got to be careful what I say here because I know that everybody does have different opportunities, but I do feel like race, sex isn't nearly, I don't want to say it's a non-factor because history existed. And so you still have that like chain of title that goes way, way, way back before civil rights movements and equal rights. And so I think that stuff, but as it sits today, I think equal opportunity is prevalent in the free market today, the way it sits. And the longer we get moved on from that, the hopefully more and more fair and equal the market will seem to be, but it's going to be, it's going to take probably more time than less than 60 years before maybe like you feel that, or like, again, that's just a really, really interesting topic, history and where we are within the scope of history now, you know? So, well, we're on the topic of history. Let's get into a little bit. I have a lot of things that people like to point to is it's the cost of housing versus the wages, right? So that's like and I was actually pretty surprised to see when you're looking at like the ratio, and these are estimated numbers. These aren't like exact numbers, but they're estimated numbers based on a few different sources. You know, you really had, it would have been like the peak of the housing market would have been for as far as affordability based on the cost of the house and how much money people were making. Really, it was like the 70s. During the 70s, you had, you know, average price of home around $25,000, while people were making about $10,000 annually, bringing it to like 2.5 times, basically 2.5 times your annual salary to buy a house. Well, it sits today, we're nearly 5 times the average annual salary to purchase an average cost of an annual home. So surprisingly enough, it seems high right now, but if you look back prior to like what was leading up to the Great Depression, they were in a very, very similar state during the Great Depression. It was before inflation had happened. So people were only, you know, the average annual income was $1,500 at that period of time, but it was still like 4.6 times the annual income to purchase the average home. So I think that's very fascinating how it feels like, yes, like the price of houses are going up at an astronomical rate. Wages aren't keeping up. But really, when you take a look back in history, it's not much different than what the United States was experiencing during the Great Depression or leading up to the Great Depression, which should maybe tell us something. It might be telling numbers. But what I found really interesting was, you know, in the 20s, you had it looks like a home ownership rate of 48%. So 48% of the people that were in their homes owned their homes as opposed to rent. And I was surprised that number, as it sits today, is actually almost at an all-time high. We're actually at like a very, very low point in history for the amount of people that are renting. It's close to 66% of the homes out there are owned by the people living in them. So we have and again, these are numbers that come from different sources, and the stated here, I believe, was the iPropertyManagement.com with some of these numbers. But so take that for what it's worth. But the rate at which people are getting into homes is still very, very high. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about that, access to homes. The current market, I know we talked about, was really, really tricky, just given the supply. So that affects a lot of stuff. I don't know. Do you guys have thoughts on those numbers, the way that industry is moving, what you hear from clients regarding those things?
I don't know. The last thing that I heard, this was couple of months ago. It's actually up 15% from last year, like home sales.
Okay.
So it feels like it can kind of feel like it's slowing down, but you never really know unless you're actually in the process of looking for a house yourself. You know, like
It's very individualized, right?
It is.
It could be like is some people in their luck. It could be like the hottest market, and then they go to try to sell their house, and it's just like, what the heck? Or vice versa. They go to try to buy, and all of a sudden it's the hardest market to buy in ever. So,
interest rates aren't really slowing buyers down because there's always the reason you have to move. Or we have a client trying to move from Oregon right now because of how our country's changed, crime's up. Her house is worth or selling for over $400,000 for a 1,000 square foot home, Rambler in Portland. She's going to come here and get a much better house, $250,000 house. And it's going to be so much better. Yeah. So you got those people that the interest rate doesn't matter, or, people that just have to move for jobs. Leases are running out. Rents are going up.
yeah.
I mean, I hear that we have clients where every year before they sign the lease, they try again, try to buy a house. Can't find one. They're pre-approved, but nothing comes on the market. They sign another lease. Year later, let's go again.
Yep.
That's another chart I've seen, and it seems to be reciprocal to the affordability of renting versus buying. That goes back and forth. That drives the price of homes. I mean, or the price of homes drives the price of rent. I'm not entirely sure which one drives which, but it's almost like society will figure out what the absolute limit that somebody can be stretched to every month,
Right.
and that'll set the price for how much their mortgage or their rental is going to be. So I hope that we get into a situation where, we return to people feeling like they're not so strapped to meet the bottom line at the end of every month. But I don't have much hope for it as far as just looking at the history of these rates and how the average income versus the average cost of a home. It's like, well, not any... We're complaining because it's in the here and now, but we're experiencing nothing different than anyone else in history has really ever experienced. Relatively low interest rates right now, still in comparison to the 80s.
Yes,
so
that's something to point out. Yeah,
it's not like it's just I think that it's very, very nearsighted to say that we're in grave danger,
this is
or a
reality.
terrible situation.
I've
with
been
the
told
market.
we're never going to see interest rates like 2 and 3 again, like people are getting. And that's what's keeping people in their homes and not selling. I don't want to sell. I got a 3% interest rate. I was talking to a guy the other day. His is 2 point something. He'd love to move out to the country and have his own hunting land, but dang, the interest rate. But he doesn't have to move. There's still so many people that have to move, and they're able to do it.
Yeah.
You want to?
And lenders are offering programs to try to help with the higher interest rate, like zero money down conventional loans. Really, our local lenders, which come and speak to us at our trilogy meetings, they keep us up to date on the different programs, down payment assistance, closing cost assistance to help a bit. So,
Okay.
Yeah, that's a big thing is go to a lender in your town or something.
yeah, and ask us because we can suggest many different lenders, and they're so fast. These local ones, they're just on their phone like us, trying to get that deal,
Right. I want to talk about the NAR lawsuit, or that is the National Association of Realtors. Now, I don't do super well with jargon, so I'm going to explain this. I had my assistant explain this lawsuit to me as if you were explaining it to a child. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to hear from you guys on this. But
Sure.
imagine you are selling a toy and you want everyone to know it is for sale. You decide to put it on a big list where lots of people look for toys. But there is a rule. If you want to put if you want to put your toy on this list, you have to promise to give some candy to anyone who helps you find a buyer. This way, all the kids who help others find toys will show up, or others who find toys will show your toy to their friends because they know they'll get some candy if their friend buys it. The rule helps more people see your toy, but some people are now saying this rule might not be fair and are asking for it to be changed. So it is very much so a pay to play on, like, we're talking Zillow. That's a perfect example of it, probably. Or any of those. Is that a bad example? What's a better example? MLS, any MLS listing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And Zillow gets all of their information from the MLS.
Okay.
Yeah. It gets there first. We put it on the MLS, and then Zillow and other sites like that, they pull it from there.
So what does it mean necessarily, though?
Basically, what it is realtor fees are generally a percentage of the sale, and that gets negotiated between the client and the realtor. Typically, the percent gets paid by the seller and a split between the selling realtor's brokerage and the buyer realtor's brokerage. So it all comes from that purchase price. And in Minnesota, for as long as we've been realtors, and probably even longer, we disclose that. We tell the sellers right up front, this is what's going to happen, that they are paying the buying realtor's fees. But I guess there are some states that didn't disclose that as well. And sellers are coming back and saying, we didn't realize this was happening. And that's where the lawsuit comes from.
Yeah, we're being accused of fixing commission rates, which are basically 6%. But as a compliance officer, it depends. I see everybody's contracts. If you have a friend, it's 4.5. You have, somebody, it's 5. But with sellers, we tell them our rate is 6%. And then when a buyer's agent brings us the buyer, we give them 2.5% of your 6%. We weren't being totally clear as far as you could make the choice not to pay the buyer agent. Like, that's where it's coming to now, is sellers are saying, what if I don't want to pay the buyer agent and the buyers can pay that 2.5%? And some sellers are starting to do that now. So you go show a house for your buyer and they want it, and you say, oh, but you got to pay me my $5,000 commission because they're not going to. It puts the seller at a disadvantage. Mm-hmm. But that's what's changing.
Is that like when you hear someone like in a home purchase, they're like, oh, we're going to cover closing costs, like the buyer will cover closing costs?
Like, that's negotiated in the sale.
Okay.
And that's more lender fees and things like that.
The listing commission is negotiated when we list a house, and it's clearly stated in the listing contract for Minnesota and in our buyer reps for Minnesota, which not all brokerages were following. I guess some forms weren't required, but our broker, Tom, always made, where we're covered. We were covered. But in there, it explains how if the seller doesn't pay the 2.5%, the buyer is responsible for it. Whether we went after that buyer for it, if something fell through, that was totally up to us. But and then there's a compensation disclosure, which we also give to buyers, saying this money's coming from the seller. This is what we expect from you. So just in our area, we already had our butts covered. Nothing is really going to change in Fergus Falls. This was a huge issue in Florida and I guess around the cities. I mean, the only thing that's going to change, which we just had a meeting about, that is going to affect people who want to go look at a house. Before, we could show somebody like you, call us, I want to go look at this house on Freiburg. Okay, we'd bring an agency form that just explains, as your buyer agent, I keep everything confidential. It's not a contract. It just lists the different agencies: seller's agent, buyer's agent, facilitator, or dual agency if I'm representing the seller and you would be the buyer. Now we also have to have the buyer representation contract signed before I can show you a house.
Signed by who?
Signed by you. That we need to get into a representation contract before I can show you a house. And that law will change in August, where I cannot show anyone a house without being under contract with them first.
So that would basically say, like, I'm agreeing to purchase this house through you guys if I purchase it.
Yep.
Yes.
You are then my client.
And is that to that specific property, or is that in general?
Any
You're tied
home.
to them.
I mean,
in
we have
general?
ways in the other that we all have done where it's only for homes shown by Team Chamberlain.
Okay.
So if you would, if I'm busy and you call another agent, they can show. But it just makes it sticky because, you might want to only see homes that are listed. Like you want to see the listing agent show you the home. So you see a Ryan Hansen sign and you say, Ryan, I'd like to go see your listing. And then you see our sign, Heidi and Andy, I want to go see your listing. Well, then how are we doing all these we're trying to figure that out. Because if the state's going to say we have to have a buyer contract before we can even show a house, how are we going to know?
I love it. I love work being harder. I just love it when the government makes the free economy harder to operate in. It's just my favorite thing about this country
And
and this
also,
state.
we're going to have to know with the buyers if they have to pay our commission. Will they want to look at houses where the sellers are not paying the buyer agent? And then the seller, they're going to only pay 3% commission to their agent.
It just further complicates the what we were talking about with Wayne and Sarah about the layers and layers and layers of regulations that get slapped onto an industry throughout the years, and nothing ever really gets condensed or reduced or made easier. It's just we just continue to add on layers of complexity to all these regulations in every industry. It's not just real estate. It's it's ridiculous at this
I'm
point.
seeing that at my 9 to 5.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We
It's
were
absolutely
told
ridiculous.
back in the day, there were no buyer agents. It was just seller agents. And buyers were not represented at all. They were not helped. Well, we changed that, and there's now the buyer agent. How do you pay the buyer agent? It got figured out. It's been working. It's been working for years. But now something came up. One state was just where sellers are saying, hey, I didn't know. I didn't know I didn't have to pay the buyer agent. I could have had that commission.
Yeah. How about, well, let's touch on AI future speculation. The future speculation of home ownership rates was kind of what I was asking about. I'm curious about that. So this is what my assistant had to say on the topic. The future of the U.S. real estate industry is likely to see home ownership rates stabilizing around 66% due to persistent affordability issues and significant student debt burdens among younger generations. High housing costs driven by supply constraints and rising construction expenses will continue to make renting a significant part of the market, particularly in urban areas. Technological advancements and sustainability efforts will influence construction prices, potentially increasing costs, but also driving innovation. Policy interventions will be crucial to addressing these challenges and promoting equitable access to home ownership. I think technological advancements are going to decrease the cost of building a home. I mean, you're seeing some crazy technological advancements that are cutting out the labor factor in building homes. So I tend to think that that's going to make things more affordable, or maybe the margins will be a little bit higher in the homes that get built.
And these tiny homes. Have you looked into
Tiny
those?
homes?
Where you can
I've
get them
looked
off
into those.
Amazon?
Of course, I've looked into those.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just pop them up.
Yeah.
You can just buy. You can buy one off Amazon. I'm not sure if you would want to live in that in Minnesota in the winter or the summer.
Well, and
you can-
something they don't tell you, like I've had friends who are like, I'm just going to buy a little plot of land and put up a tiny home. Okay, yeah. And then you're going to dig a well, and then you're going to install a septic, and then you got to get it hooked up to power. And guess what? You just bought yourself a tiny little home for just as much as a big home would cost.
Yep.
It's frustrating.
Like I've seen stuff where it's basically some kind of, I don't know if it's exactly concrete, but it looks like somebody's 3D printing a home.
Yep.
Where it's just like,
Just a little
Yeah.
concrete mold printer.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's
crazy.
insane.
All right. How about biggest? We'll get into biggest surprise and business advice here. So this is my favorite question for people. We'll start with it. Biggest surprise that you realized in your industry. Whoever wants to go first. By the way, I am appreciative of the fact that we had 2 shandies here. I got one and you guys split the other. So I'm feeling like I got the better end of that deal.
I gotta say, everything in real estate has been a surprise for me. We always run into new hoops, new problems.
Yeah, new
Always
new
learning.
situations. Yep.
Yeah, dealing with foreclosures. You learn something. I had one last year where the woman was in a nursing home, and the rules with DHS, nobody knew. Nobody in my office. Like, the DHS can dictate how much the house sells for and things like that. And so it's always surprising. That's part of the fun. That, and just like, you might have the worst month and not have any deals, and then you get that call. Hey, Heidi, I want to list my house. And it's just like, you're over the moon again. Yeah. It's just exciting. Every day is exciting in real estate. That's why people love talking about it.
Right? Yeah, it's a fun industry to talk about. Really, I think there's just so much speculation and so much movement, and it affects everybody. It's like gas prices, gas and housing. Everybody needs it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the most part. Not everybody needs gas, but everybody uses gas. So, Andy, biggest
Yes.
surprise.
Oh my goodness. I should have been thinking while you were talking. Yeah, it's just it's similar to Heidi's, where a situation will come up and it's like, I've never seen this before. And then you go talk to someone who's been in the business for 30 years and they've never seen it either. Like, this can't be the first time this come up. But yeah, apparently there's always just a first for everything. And you never really know what you're going to see. There have been times where we show a house and we come back and the renters have changed the locks, and so we can't get in.
That was one of our first.
That was one of the first ones. Yeah,
And it's harder than, like, going to a brokerage when you get your license and interviewing, and they want to tell you you're going to make 6-figure incomes. And, you know, it's after you get into the business and you're with the broker, they go, oh, it takes 10 years to get established. You're going to struggle. You're going to have another job. But you can't be a serious agent if you have another job. You get ridiculed for that too. So yeah, it's hard. It's hard to stay with it and not give up. And it's the love of it, the love of real estate. And like, I'll go back to Trilogy, the collaboration, the contribution, community. We are such big advocates for being a part of the community. When I did daycare, I never knew I could be a part of the Chamber of Commerce. To be able to be a part of the Chamber of Commerce and be involved in the town we grew up in, and have like the city saying, people that work for the city saying hi to us, and business owners like Paul Hicks are our friends. It's a great community. We're so passionate about Fergus Falls and its growth. That's another reason to stay in real estate, to be involved with the community.
Love it. All right, real quick, best business advice. What do you got?
Yeah, don't give up. You can't ever fail until you quit.
yeah. Stay positive. Stay solution oriented.
Yeah, and surround yourself with positive people.
Yeah. Don't feel afraid to ask for help. If you're a realtor and you've ever just spoken to another realtor and you need advice, go to them. Go to anybody, and they will more than likely help you.
Awesome. Anything else you guys want to add here today that we didn't get to talk about? We were pretty sporadic today. We were pretty all over the place.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say that we had perfect structure for the show, but I really appreciated hearing your guys' story. That's really, I just think it's so cool and so unique that you guys met each other later in life. That's an encouraging, cool thing
and chose a new career later in life where,
absolutely.
we got young kids at 25 who think they got it all figured out. And it's like, dang, I wish I'd had it all figured out at 25.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you guys coming on the show. If you guys have been following along with the show, there are a few new ways to access it now and get this content. So we are on KBRF 1250 Wednesday afternoons, available on the podcast tab in the Fergus Now app or kbrfradio.com. Obviously, wherever you get your podcasts. We've got a YouTube channel now. I'm doing some clips and reels on Instagram and Facebook. So be on the lookout. Give the Fergus Falls Business Spotlight podcast a follow on those social media platforms. We're looking to, share that content and get that out to people both in our community and outside of it. I mean, I think that the reach on some of these videos is going to be interesting to see what this does for our community, getting people hearing about what we are here in Fergus Falls. So thank you guys very much for joining the show. Thank you to the sponsors. Outstate Brewing. How's the shandy?
It was very
delicious.
good.
It's very, very good. Stumbinos, Victor Lundeen's, Lakes Area Grow Co., Elks Point Bar and Grill. Thank you guys very much for being a part of the show. We'll be back. I've got Bob Layton, the CEO, I think, for the next episode. So I'm excited for that one.